Hey, what's up, YouTube family? It's your favorite black guy from Nebraska. And yes, there's black people in Nebraska. Today, we're going to learn about ancient Mesopotamia, specifically the black history of Iraq. You guys enjoyed the Arab presentation, the Arab content. So now we're going to talk about Iraq, right? Like I said, I'm reading out of this book, When the World Was Black, the whole Untold History of the First Civilizations, Part 2, Ancient Civilization. So I hope that you guys enjoy this just as much, or if not more, than you enjoy my content in Arabia. And it's so interesting with my videos. I'll make the content in regards to like these areas, and some videos will go viral, some videos get maybe 26 likes. I don't know how that works, but I want to figure it out, hopefully, eventually, so that I can bring you presentations that I know a lot of you are going to love, and that the presentations will be thrown into the algorithm. I'll figure it out one day, hopefully. So, but without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Ancient Mesopotamia, the black history of Iraq. We know that the people who introduced the Neolithic age to the Near East, the Natufians, were black. To be technical, they were an African-centered intellectual infusion into a long-established local community, long removed from the root of civilization. Almost 8,000 years after the Natufians began revolutionizing the cultures of the Near East and Europe, they gave birth to the civilization of ancient Mesopotamia. Again, it appears that a strong black presence was critical in its rise. This isn't a new theory, nor is it some sort of Afrocentric myth. As early as 1911, William Henry Ferris, a black man, devoted the entire 28th chapter of his phenomenal yet relatively unknown work, The African Abroad, to the Negro and the Babylonian civilization. Ferris begins this chapter by quoting Joseph P. Whitney's, let's say that name again, look this up, Joseph P. Whitney's Race Life of the Aryan Peoples. This is a quote from Joseph P. Whitney. Back in the centuries which are scarcely historic, where history gives indeed only vague hintings, are traces of a widespread primitive civilization, crude, imperfect, garish, barbaric, yet ruling the world of that age from its seats of power in the valleys of the Ganges and the Euphrates and the Nile. And it was the black races. The first Babylon seems to have been built by a Negroid race. The earliest Egyptian civilization seems to have been Negroid. It was in the days before the Semite was known in either land. The black seems to have built up empire such as it was by the water of the Ganges before Mongol or Aryan. Before Mongol or Aryan rulership, it was Negroid rulership. Ferris goes on to cite the work of George Rawlinson, who discusses the Negro race of the Mesopotamian people in considerable depth in his work, The Five Oriental Monarchies. Ferris spends 16 pages of The African Abroad detailing the Negroid character of the Cushites, the Sumerians, the Babylonians, the Chaldeans, the Susians, the Akkadians, and the other Ethiopian Hamitic people of the ancient Near East. He also connects the black people of the Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Ethiopia to the biblical history of Cush, Ham, and Nimrod. In 1915, W.E.B. Du Bois published The Negro, where he says, the Negro peoples were the beginning of civilization along the Ganges. The Euphrates and the Nile seems proven. Early Babylon was founded by a Negroid race. Hammurabi's code, the most ancient known, says Anna and Bel called me. Hammurabi, the exalted prince, the worshiper of the gods, to cause justice to prevail in the land, to destroy the wicked, to prevent the strong from oppressing the weak, to go forth like the sun over the blackhead race, to enlighten the land and to further the welfare of the people. Now, that was a quote by W.E.B. Du Bois in 1915 in his book, the book he published called The Negro. Why haven't you heard this before? If historians admitted that the people of Sumer were black, there wouldn't be so much debate about whether civilization, agriculture, writing, urbanization, etc. started in Egypt or Sumer. If historians were to admit that Sumer and Egypt were both black, they find some place new to claim as the cradle of civilization. someplace more unblack, like Utah. That was just a joke. This is because they don't want you to know that you are the origin of civilization. Hell, they had a hard enough time admitting that you were the first humans. After it became hard to deny that the first humans were black Africans, they took the emphasis off who is the original man and put it on who is the father of civilization. They kept moving the cheese, so to speak. Every time you realize that you are the origin of something, they say that thing isn't as important as they said it was before. This is why black scholarship is essential. In 1985, another esteemed black historian, John G. Jackson, argued that early Mesopotamia was a black civilization. Before the Chaldean rule in Mesopotamia, there were the empires of the Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians. The earliest civilization of Mesopotamia was that of the Sumerians. They are designated in the Assyrio-Babylonian inscriptions as the blackheads or black-faced people, and they are shown on the monuments as beardless and with shaven heads. This easily distinguishes them from the Semitic Babylonians, who are shown with beards and long hair. From the myths and traditions of the Babylonians, we learn that their culture came originally from the south. Sir Henry Rawson concluded from this and other evidence that the first civilized inhabitants of Sumer and Akkad were immigrants from the African Ethiopia. John D. Baldwin, the American Orientalist, on the other hand, claims that since ancient Arabia was known as Ethiopia, they could have just as well come from that country. And that was a quote or a paragraph from John G. Jackson. Here's what makes Jackson's commentary notable. Jackson drew on several sources but acknowledged, like an honest historian, when his sources didn't agree. Although he cites Henry Rawson, brother of our often quoted George Rawson, and John Dennison Baldwin, author of Prehistoric Nations, both of whom presented cases for an Ethiopian origin of the Sumerian leadership, as well as an Egyptian connection. He cites alternative theories such as those of H.R. Hall, who proposed that Mesopotamia was civilized by a black migration from India. Was Mesopotamia part Indian? In 1916, Dr. Hall, representing the Department of Egyptian and Assyrian Antiquities of the British Museum, argued that the Sumerians were blacks from the Indus Valley. The ethnic type of the Sumerians, so strongly marked in their statues and reliefs, was as different from those of the races which surrounded them as was their language from those of the Semites, Aryans, or others. And it is to this Dravidic ethnic type of India that the ancient Sumerian bears most resemblance, so far as we can judge from his monuments. And it is by no means improbable that the Sumerians were an Indian race which passed certainly by land, perhaps also by sea, through Persia to the valley of the two rivers. It was in the Indian home, perhaps the Indus Valley, that we suppose for them that their culture developed. On the way, they left the seeds of their culture in Elam. There is a little doubt that India must have been one of the earliest centers of human civilization, and it seems natural to suppose that the strange, un-Semitic, un-Aryan people who came from the east to civilize the west were of Indian origin, especially when we see that our own eyes how very Indian the Sumerians were in type. In light of linguistic connections between Elamite and Dravidian, as well as the high mobility of the Anu people, now we talked about the Anu people, who carried those languages, it is possible that some of the ancient Sumerians were descendants of an Anu-speaking black population from India. But genetic studies suggest that a northeastern African origin is more likely for the first Sumerians. Either way, the reason why all these ancient civilizations share so much in common is because they were all settled by the same wave of black people. There are the people we call the Anu. In different historical periods, they established different phases of civilization. In this period, John Dennison Baldwin calls them Cushites. It seems to me possible for any free-minded scholar to study the traditions, mythologies, fragmentary records, moldering monuments, and other remains of the prehistoric ages, and fail to see that the people descended in Hebrew, described in Hebrew scriptures as Cushites, were the original civilizers of southwestern Asia, and that in the deepest antiquity, their influence was established in nearly all the coast regions, from the extreme east to the extreme west of the Old World. This has been repeatedly pointed out with more or less clearness, and is one of those incontestable facts that must be accepted. The Kushite expansion into Asia explains why so many of the ancient place names in the Near East and India are similar to Kush. And that is going to end the presentation for today. I hope you guys really enjoyed that. I hope you learned something. And that is the Black history of Iraq. So it's your favorite black guy from Nebraska. Yes, there's black people here in Nebraska. Please like, share, and subscribe. I'm out. Please like, share, and subscribe. Peace.